Hi guys, it's Lucy and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to talk about a little checklist of things you might need to consider as you come to the end of your paramedic science degree. So I'm going to be looking at your C1 licence, applying for jobs, and then any sort of additional stuff that I think you might need to know or think about. So yeah, let's get on with this kind of checklist. So first of all, let's touch on C1s. If you don't know, C1 is the licence that you need on your regular driving licence to be able to drive an ambulance. It's over 7.5 tonne vehicle, I think. So before you can even apply to get your C1 provisional, you need to go and get a C1 medical done. Medical companies vary on how they do this. Some are really thorough and some aren't as thorough, which is a bit concerning in some areas. For me, because it was during a time of COVID, mine was done literally from my car window. I literally pulled up and they did it all from the car. This medical will vary. If you go to your GP, it's usually a lot more expensive than if you go privately. So you're looking at possibly maybe between £30 to £100 for a medical. Not 100% clued up on prices, but that's kind of the price I came to. Yeah, so you do a medical, you get a form signed for your medical, which you need to pick up from a post office or from online. And then you send the medical off with your application forms, and your C1 provisional comes back to you. You also send your licence off with that, and then your C1 provisional comes back to you. Then you've got to start looking at C1 theory. So it's similar to a car theory, but you're looking at driving a bigger vehicle. So you're going to be looking at tachographs on a vehicle. Ambulances don't have them, but you have to learn about it. Restrictions of a bigger vehicle, what sort of signs can you see because of those restrictions, all of that stuff really. Yeah, and there's also hazard perception. It's, I think, pretty much the exact same hazard perception as you do in your car driving, but yeah, if you get the app, the LGV theory app I think it's called, it's all on there for you to learn. And if you keep going through that, even when you're on shifts on placement, go through that when you've got a bit of downtime and you should be okay. Once you've done your theory, you then have to go and do driving. Something to look into is whether a trust offers the C1 when you join them. So certain trusts offer a kind of bursary kind of process, so they'll pay for your C1. Others take it out of your wages over the next few months after you've done it, and others don't put any money towards it at all. You have to do it yourself. I decided, as I wasn't sure what trust I was going for, to do it myself, because at the end of the day I was most likely going to be paying it out my wages down the line anyway, so I paid for it myself. One thing I would recommend is looking around. I actually ended up travelling for it, did about an hour and a half's drive to the place rather than staying local because it was a lot cheaper. You're talking £200 and £300 difference. So yeah, look around, see what prices they are, and go possibly for the cheapest one if you can afford to travel, because they are really expensive. Some people pay over £1,000. So yeah, you do your test. In the test there's a reversing element and then a driving element, and they're separate tests. You can't go on to the driving until you've done the reversing, and it kind of goes like that. And yeah, it's quite enjoyable really, learning how to drive a bigger vehicle. It's not as scary as it sounds. But yeah, that is your C1. The next thing you're going to start looking at, I had to start this very early into my third year because I was a January student. It'll happen a bit later if you're a September student, but actually applying for jobs. One thing I would recommend is, even if you're absolutely adamant what trust you want to work for, apply for a few others, because you generally do not know what's going to happen between application and starting a job. So having your options open is a brilliant thing, even if it is a bit more stressful having to manage 2 applications. So just a little bit about the job application process. Majority of trust jobs go through NHS jobs. However, one I applied for did it through NHS Jobs and then transferred your application over to a different system. So that does happen. It's not a problem, but it ends up meaning you have to have multiple different passwords for different things. Before you can do your application, I'd recommend rewriting your CV and also starting a CPD portfolio. This is something I started from first year, but not many people do. So get all together your exam certificates, your any CPD you've done, all those certificates, any essays where you think you've got top marks kind of thing, anything that's going to represent you as you are as a student, but also who you're going to be as a clinician. And just get it all together. You can do it paper or you can do it on the computer, whatever works easier for you. Yeah, so once you've got a CV and a CPD portfolio, it's ready for any sort of application you're going to do. Not everyone applies to be an NHS Trust paramedic, and not all job applications ask for a CV or a CPD portfolio, but they're handy to have just in case, and so there's not a mad rush for it. Also, having some sort of personal statement is also handy. You could always adapt your one used for uni or rewrite one. The next thing to consider, and it sounds really stupid, but if you're applying for a paramedic position that requires you to drive an ambulance and you wear glasses like me, be prepared to need an eye test, need eye assessment, anything like that. So for one trust I applied for, a regular eye test is not enough. You have to go and get some sort of visual field exam. I think, for example, Specsavers class it as a DVLA exam, which is an additional £10 to the normal £25 eye test at Specsavers. So yeah, if you can try and get it for free, apparently there is such thing as a free eye test, but I couldn't find one. If you can do that, that's handy, but just be prepared to need a new eye test or prove your eye test was within the past 2-3 years kind of thing, or even year, depends. Next thing to kind of prepare for is the interview process. Know your 6 C's of healthcare, know the role of a paramedic, and know your trust's expectations, aims, and kind of what the trust revolves around. And finally, I think, for applying to jobs, some trusts do their own driving tests, some do their own fitness tests. Driving test wise, you're going to need to know your highway code, and it is going to be helpful if you've already done your C1, but it's not a necessity because you are driving a smaller vehicle. Fitness tests, they're all different, not every trust does them. Some do them actually relevant to the equipment you use, others don't. It's very varied, so understand and know what you're going to be expected of when you go and do an interview, because not all of them just do an interview. There is so many different stages, and just be prepared for that. The fitness tests are difficult. They're designed to be difficult. I've had a lot of trouble with fitness tests, so if you can start early on. I started in first year training for a fitness test and I've still struggled, so if you can start early on training for it and know exactly what they're going to expect of you, the better. Then finally, just additional information or additional things to think about. Where you're going to be living is the main thing. For me, I've lived in student accommodation for 3 years, which has led me to now have to find somewhere. If you've moved out early on in your 3-year degree, it's going to be a lot easier. But yeah, it's personal preference where you're going to be living, what sort of environment you want to be living in. Are you in a position where you could house share for a few years to save up extra money? Yeah, it's completely personal preference. For me, I decided to live somewhere that's a bit cheaper, on the basis that I'll be able to save up on a deposit on a house a lot easier, hopefully, if all goes to plan. Finally, the thing I haven't done and I wish I'd done, plan some holidays, because you've done 3 bloody years at uni. Congratulate yourself on that and take yourself on a plane and go to somewhere, because you deserve it. You've done 3 years at university, you've survived that. Go on a holiday, even if it's in a Premier Inn down the road, just go somewhere. But yeah, that's all I can think of for today. If you've got any questions about anything that I haven't mentioned or have mentioned, leave them down below and I will get back to you on those. Hopefully that's been helpful, and good luck on finishing your degrees, and I will see you in a video very, very soon. Bye guys.